Good afternoon, everybody. If you are in Europe or Middle East or Asia, good morning if you are in Americas. And thank you very much for joining this first webinar of the year. And of course, I will be pleased to wish you all my best wishes for 2024. First, a good health to travel all over the world and fill your order backlog and have a successful year at the end of 2024 to begin with. Today, we'll focus on oil and gas, petrochemical, and energy transition. The idea is to make a review of what did happen during 2023 as a recap, and of course, to share with you our vision for 2024 for those segments based on the data we collect every day through Project Smart Explorer. So I wish you a nice webinar and with many questions at the end. And I'll be pleased to share this presentation with Jacques Doucet, who has joined our company early last year, and of course, Jean, that you of course know from previous meetings.
Thank you, Jean-Charles. We'll start with a short teaser on the next webinar. The date and subject are really settled. It will be held on the 7th of March, and we will talk about energy transition. So both from a technology perspective and let's say a business perspective. So exceptionally, the webinar of today is public, but the following one in March, as usual, will be exclusive to our Project Smart Explorer subscribers. If you have such a subscription, you will receive anyway the slides of today's webinar, and you will also receive the invitation for the following one. The agenda of today is pretty straightforward. We will have a look at the first big movement in the market, and then we will funnel down to 2023 and start to have a look on the year 24 and later. And we will conclude with the last focus on the energy transition. Should you have any question, feel free to ask them in the chat. We will answer them at the end of the presentation. If you don't know us, a quick introduction on To Be First Consulting. So Jean-Charles created To Be First Consulting now a bit more than 12 years ago, with an extensive background in oil and gas. And Jean will do most of the talking today to cover the responsibility of the company now a couple of years ago. And as Jean-Charles said, myself, I joined a year ago, and I'm in charge of the Central Europe countries. Some key figures and key references of the users of Project Smart Explorer. So you will probably recognize most of the names now. Some of them are working with us since day one. We come now 200 of them. And what they are looking for is Project Smart Explorer. So what it is, in a nutshell, it's an online database in energy. So we track currently 1,500 projects from the design phase up to late EPC in these three big families, meaning oil and gas, petrochemicals, and now energy transition with the renewables, the decarbonation, but also the recycling application. So the list of application is not fixed. It's constantly evolving following the market demands. Two things that we need to, let's say, keep in head. The first one is the CapEx threshold to be included in the database. For oil and gas and petrochemical, we start at $100 million US. Below, the projects are considered too small, so we take them out. For energy transition, on the opposite, it's a bit different. We go way below, sometimes 15 or sometimes 10 million US dollar. The reason is simple. It's a growing market, so it's crucial to catch from the early beginning the pilot and the small projects, because they will impact and influence the market on the following. Now let's start and jump directly with the heart of today's webinar. We will look at the big market news. So now it's been almost 2 years that there is the war in Ukraine, with the consequences that we know on the energy market. There are some other tensions. So Jean will make a summary of these big tectonic movements, because it's also very important to understand then how it influences the energy market.
Thank you very much, Jack, for this introduction. And as you said, the last 2 years have been quite, I would say, rich in action for the energy route, and especially of oil and gas. And here I try to sum it up with 4 graphs. On the left, you will see the situation which has been provoked by the war in Ukraine, where on the top left graph, you see the supply of the Russian crude oil to India, where it started from almost zero at beginning of 2022 to almost today, almost 80 million barrels per month, which is a lot of oil and gas you need to reroute. And at the opposite, the graph on the left bottom, where you see the volume of Russian gas pipe to Europe, which of course since the beginning of the war has gone more or less to zero, and which has of course at the beginning of January 2024 go to zero due to the end of all the contract of supply from the Russian gas to Europe. So this was a big hit in 2022. I would say that in 2023, to recap, we have passed over the short-term impact of those political game and I would say economical bargain as well. And we are more today into the long-term effects. But on top of this actually crisis of infrastructure, because it was not really a crisis of production or of market, but just let's say it took a long time to readapt all the infrastructure to reroute all the oil and gas which was produced in Russia to Asia Pacific, but also to supply Europe mostly from US for the gas. And on top of those crises, we were seeing other crises in terms of oil and gas route. If you look at the graph in the middle, I'm sure you're aware that today some I would say national entities of Yemen are threatening the Osman Canal, which are bringing a lot of tension around the Suez Canal. And of course, it's scaling up the side of the road for all the oil and gas coming, especially from the Asiatic part, or coming from the Middle East going to Asia, or also to supply from Middle East to Europe. And of course, it's putting a lot of pressure on the routes, which are already into a big shakedown reorganization. And of course, it's not helping. And we have also some side example in Europe. I put here the example of the Baltic connector, where a Chinese cargo has just destroyed with his anchor the electrical cable supplying between Finland and Estonia. And of course, when you take only one incident on one side, okay, it's manageable. But if you start to put all of them on top of each other, it starts to be quite a shakedown. And we are still, I would say, in the long-term issues to say, okay, how can we secure for each country? It's a big challenge to say, how can we secure our supply of energy? And it has really shaken down on the last 2 years, especially going into action in 2023. A second point, which is hitting the news, is of course the situation of Guyana. Because Guyana, if you have subscribed to Project Smart Explorer, you may have seen that on the last quarter has announced some new projects and some new final investment decision. But in the meantime, Venezuela was starting to dispute, I would say, half of the land of Guyana. And in fact, the government of Maduro organized a referendum which has proclaimed and claimed half of Guyana land, not so much for the land, but mostly for the offshore, I would say, territorial that he could claim from that, with a clear objective to try to seize all the assets which are in operation there. The only problem that when you look at who are the operators there, it's mostly ExxonMobil, but also Repsol, CNOOC, which is Chinese, or Chevron. And not sure how it will go. Today, it has not escalated into a conflict, but still there is some high pressure in the region resulting from this political game. So let's see. Let's hope it's not the next crisis, but we have to bear it in mind as well. Another point, which was quite clear in 2023, was some trouble about the energy transition. So here we don't want to say that energy transition is going banana. Clearly not. But energy transition is growing up. Is starting to move forward quite massively. You will see in the numbers, but we are experiencing, I would say, a problem of maturity from this market. And here we try to put you three examples which are a little bit counterintuitive when you think about energy transition, where, for example, in Germany, RWE is dismantling a wind farm to extend a coal mine. Because today, in terms of sovereignty, it's more important to have this coal mine than to have the wind farm. We have a little bit the same example in France, not to only talk about Germany, but in France, a judge has asked an operator to dismantle its wind farm because it was killing just too much birds. The last figure was about, it was in thousands of birds over the 2-3 years. So it was quite massive impact, of course, for the ecosystem around, and it was clearly not anticipated before. And the last example is from US on the bottom left, where Panasonic is building up a giant battery factory for electrical cars, which is good. The only problem is that to supply the electricity to this plant, they are going to build up a power generation plant running on coal, which of course doesn't make an electrical car really green when you start to power its manufacturing from coal. So we are still, I would say, in a maturing phase for energy transition, and that's why next webinar is about clearly this topic, because we have the short-term impact. I would say that we need energy which is cheap, sovereign, available, and we have the long-term perspective of building up a sustainable energy world where, okay, it's hard to fit all the requirements, but we still need to become carbon neutral. And in the sense, I took some example of project, but we could do the same with companies. And here again, the idea is to enlighten a little bit how the companies are searching themselves for the right strategy in the energy transition. And what we have seen quite clearly, some companies specializing into renewable, and some companies which were, for example, from the oil and gas or from distributor of energy, going out of renewable to go more into sustainable energy. And here I put you, for example, a little bit distributed from Shell, which has closed down its renewable branch and fired half of the staff of the low carbon division. Dominion Energy did more or less the same in US, where they stopped all the investment in renewable, but to focus on decarbonation. And then you have the example, for example, of Enel in Italy, where the Italian government has asked Enel to stop their investment in renewable because they were too exposed to risk, and to refocus a little bit more into natural gas, mostly, to make sure that Enel is profitable and is stable on the long term. And of course, I'm sure you have seen the example of Siemens Energy through its subsidiary Siemens Gamesa, which is suffering a lot from the windmill project, and where the German government had to jump in, I would say, trying to provide a loan line of 12 billion, trying to secure. So a lot of companies which have been going really fast into renewable are stepping out. It doesn't mean that the market is collapsing, clearly not, but we see the player going more and more precisely into the strategy and not trying to cover everything of the energy world.
One of the subjects that was quite intense this year was the COP28, especially before it started, because when Al Jaber was at the head of the COP28, most of the people, or let's say in the common media, this way it was seen as a joke and not serious to have the head of ADNOC at the head of the COP28. We had a different reading of that, saying it might not be such a bad idea to have energeticians leading the energy transition. So now the COP is over. Let's see what's came out of it, and if it's a success or a failure.
Yeah. Thank you, Jack. And you're quite right in saying so. To be honest, we had predicted that the COP28 should be quite prolific in terms of decision, in terms of advancement. And in fact, when you see what has been signed and the consensus it went through, I think it might be the more important COP since the Paris Agreement of the COP21. And of course, there were a lot of decisions in the UIA consensus, and we could talk about it just for hours. But in terms of energy project, we'll focus on the aspect and the decision which have been taken about it, and it has all been summed up in one sentence, which is here on the left, which is slash emission to accelerate just, equitable, and orderly energy transition. And here there is a lot of things in this sentence, but clearly I think, and that was a little bit the motivation of Sultan Al-Jaber, was not only to take energy transition for the purpose of making energy transition, but trying to refight climate change, and of course to fight the emission first. And that was really taken to the next step. So we can talk about renewable, that's great, but let's go tackle the emission. And then they added the three words, just, equitable, and orderly, to make sure that the country which are in developing countries and not developed countries could also find themselves into those decisions, and to make sure that any decision that could be taken at the COP28 will not slow down their development, which is, of course, if you are, I would say, in a Western country, can be quite weird, but if you're in the developing countries, the first, I would say, motion is first to develop your country and then trying to fit into climate change. And for the energy part, as I said, there were one document they published, which has been called Global Decarbonization Accelerator, GDA. Maybe you have seen these three letters everywhere. And there were three main decisions which have been taken. The first one was to tackle everything which was, I would say, all the gases participating to global warming, which were not CO2. Meaning that the idea was to say, okay, we are going to tackle all the methane and non-CO2 gases, because those gases represent a small fraction in terms of volume of emission, but a large fraction in terms of global warming effect. Because as you may know, for example, methane has between 30 to 50 times the larger power of greenhouse effect compared to CO2. So that was clearly one of the goals, to say, okay, we are going to stop all the methane. So, for example, all the leakage of methane on LNG project, but also all the flaring and all the emission. It's not only in the energy market, it's also for on energy project, it's also for farming, for waste, or for livestock. But we have to bear in mind that, okay, the leakage of methane is going to be forbidden, and the flaring as well. There is also a second point on decarbonizing, the energy system of today. Because by the time, I would say, we make energy transition, we build up everything renewable, clean, etc. It's great, but it will take decades to do so. And the problem that we don't have decades to save the planet. And here, clearly, they have been quite pragmatic to say, okay, and to bring on board about 50 companies. Today, it's more about 60 companies which have signed it today, 1 month later, which represent 50% of the total volume of production of oil and gas globally. So it's quite a big number. And the idea is to say, okay, we are going to make the production of oil and gas as clean as possible, and also transition away from coal. Okay, so not to stop coal, but at least to put carbon capture on top of it, and to stop the development of power generation running on coal. So let's see how it goes. But again, it's quite pragmatic, and it's a quick win solution that can be put in place to decarbonate heavily our energy world. And then the last step is, of course, to build up the energy system of the future. And here there is clearly two branches. First is tripling the investment in renewable, which is quite clear. So it means that we are already into an acceleration, but it should accelerate even more. So let's see how it goes in terms of supply chain. And the second step is energy efficiency. Because, of course, the best savings you can do and the best energy you can have is the one you don't use. And here, again, there is a lot of effort and a lot of room for improvement that we can have. To open up, I would say, the topic of COP28, we can talk already about COP28 that will happen in Azerbaijan. And maybe you have seen the news, or maybe you are on holiday, but at least you can catch up now. Mokhtar Babayev has been announced, has been appointed as chairman of the COP29. Today, this person is the Minister of Ecology of Azerbaijan, but just so you know, he's a former SOCAR executive, so the national oil company. So, of course, a little bit like Jack mentioned, when he has been appointed, all the media were a little bit inclined not to follow his lead. But in the meantime, this person is an expert of energy. He was VP of the ecology branch of SOCAR, so he knows what he is talking about. And he's already putting on the map to say, okay, that would be the occasion to discuss about abated versus unabated fossil energy. And here, if you don't know those two words, abated and unabated, I advise you to come to our next webinar, because there will be a lot of talking about those two words to say, okay, we pursue fossil energy, but make it clean. And here it's a big challenge, especially in Europe, where we start to see this discussion happening today. In terms of market trends, because here the idea is to go a little bit more into the figures and what are the drivers of the project. I try to take the last figures, last update of demand on the long term for oil and gas. Because when you take decision to invest in oil and gas project, of course, you need to have a demand behind, because nobody is going to produce oil and gas if there is no demand. And here, it's a little bit counterintuitive if you follow Western media, but in fact, when you look at the figures, especially on the left, the figures for natural gas demand, the demand for natural gas is growing by 5 to 10% every year, more or less, and this pace should remain till 2050. And here, of course, it has a lot of reason behind, but you can imagine how much project you need to line up in terms of LNG production to match with this demand increasing by 5 to 10%, because it means that it has doubled on the last 20 years and it will double on the next 20 years. So here it's quite clear that it's a massive pace and massive line of project that should be brought to the table. And on the right for the fuel, so really for the oil, the forecast is not increasing that much, but it's increasing, I would say, slowly, to the point that today we are about 103, 104 million barrels per day of consumption, which is massive in all aspects. And by the end of the decade, we should be around 106, 108 million barrels per day, which is, of course, massive. And to sustain this pace, and of course, this pace of 108 should be on a plateau till 2050, according to all the serious scenario you can find on the planet. And here it's quite massive volume of oil that need to be produced, of course, to sustain the world. And of course, you need to line up the project again to make sure that you can, I would say, compensate all the depleting oil and gas field, but you need also to increase the volume which is produced on a daily basis. If we look at why and what are the driver for those volume of production and this increase in demand, to be honest, the petrochem and the petrochem needed the first demand growth driver for oil and gas. Clearly, electricity is second, because even if we all buy electric cars, we still need to produce electricity, and renewable is not, I would say, happening fast enough to compensate all the growth in terms of demand for electricity. And here you have a clear, I would say, correlation between the oil and gas demand and the population. And that's why petrochem is a little bit the vector of this growth. To explain it in one clear example, here I put you a graph which represents the volume of consumption of polymers, so of plastic and petrochem product, of course, as a representative of, on the top in light blue, of developed countries, so especially Europe, US, for example, or Australia. You have on the bottom the consumption of developing countries, and in the middle, the green curve is the consumption of the Chinese citizen. And here it's really on average per citizen. And what you can clearly see is that on the last 20 years, China has made I would say, the path to grow from the consumption of developing countries to the consumption of a developed country. And here you can imagine the population of China being above a billion, when the consumption of plastic goes from more or less 5 kilos per person to 60 or even 70 kilos per person. Here, it means that you must multiply by 14 the production of polymer. And it's true for all the variation of, I would say, of petrochem product, and that's why it's driving a lot the consumption of oil and gas. And it's not something that you could replace, I would say, easily in energy transition by renewable electricity, for example. So here, clearly, you have a double effect of this population. You have the first effect, which is the growing number of inhabitants we have on the planet, which consume more petrochem product and consume more electricity and more energy, so of course more oil and gas. So these grow by the simple effect of number of people, the demand for energy. And then you have the second effect, which is clearly the one we see here for China. The standard of life growing up asks for more petrochem product and for more energy as well. And that's what stimulates also the demand for oil and gas, knowing that this journey, which has been made by China, I would say, on the last 20 years, is being made today by countries like India or Indonesia. And of course, I would say as soon as those Asiatic countries will be done with their journey, we will see a scale up of Africa, for example, representing a Navy population, doing more or less the same journey to grow and grow their consumption of petrochem product. And that's why you end up with, I would say, perspective till 2050, where the volume and the demand of oil and gas is not going to go down.
Okay, so if we summarize, basically there is a will to reduce our CO2 footprint, but there is also the acceptance that we can't live without oil and gas today. We don't know how to live without it. But the question is then, is that will just lines, let's say, to have the journalists talk to each other, or is there actually a real impact in the daily business? So now we will have a look at 2023, what actually happened during that year in terms of projects, and we will have the first look of what's in the pipe for 24 and so on.
Yeah, you're right, Jack. So let's go back to business. Okay, let's not talk about drivers, impact, blah, blah, but let's go really to the figures. And here it's quite important to reflect 2023 to other year and to previous years. I started from 2019 to go, I would say, above and before all the crisis of COVID, of Ukraine, energy crisis, blah, 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 to 2019 as a reference year, where in terms of total capex being invested on the market for oil and gas, petrochem and energy transition being roughly just above 300 billion US dollar. Then, of course, we got a big hit in 2020 with COVID, with figure going down to 230. 2021 was a catch-up, a little bit of 2020, so roughly a good year with 360 billion. Then 2022 starting to scale up Ukraine crisis and energy transition to the point of 2023, where we have awarded in terms of EPC, so it's not, I would say, forecast, it's actual business being signed, above 500 projects and a total capex of 488 billion. So clearly, it was a record year. It was anticipated, of course. If you attend regularly our webinars, or if you look our post on LinkedIn, it's no surprise. But to this extent, we start to arrive to new record, and we talk of a market which was, I would say, 4 or 5 years ago, 300 billion already. So it's not a small market, which has gone up by almost 50-60%. So it's a massive increase on the market. Let's see where the limit is. It's quite interesting to see that the NOCs in year 2023 have dominated the market, has remained the biggest players. So the national companies have been awarding about 55% of the capex, which is massive. And the distribution of the market in terms of category, 47% of the award were for oil and gas. So clearly representing still a big part and big share of the market. Energy transition, as anticipated, has become bigger than petrochem with 29% of the market, and petrochem still maintaining 1/4 of the business. So clearly, oil and gas is remaining the big boy, I would say, of the market. But in the meantime, energy transition is taking off clearly as anticipated, and is not marginal anymore. It starts to be also a big ticket on the market. It's quite interesting also to follow up all those maturing technologies and type of plant. In terms of geography, it has been also shifting quite frankly. On the top here, you see the region where the projects are located. And okay, without big surprise, you see Asia Pacific representing 23% of the market, Middle East or North America representing 22% of the market, which were already region quite active for the past years. What is quite new is to have Europe representing 15% of the project. It was never the case before, but Europe is benefiting from the momentum of energy transition because Europe is really the hometown of energy transition, and that's why Europe is starting to be the host of many projects. And the second part is Africa, of course, because I would say if we compare Africa volume of projects compare to 2019, Africa has more or less doubled since 2019 its volume of project, which is massive in terms of course, of investment, in terms of interest, and this growth is not fading away. In terms of FEED and EPC, I would say no big surprise. Europe and US are remaining, I would say, the main player. What is quite new effect on the market is that I would say on the previous year, we're used to see a lot of FEED being done in Europe, shifting to Asia Pacific for execution for EPC. It's no more the case. Most of the FEED which are starting in Europe remain in Europe for EPC. As the opposite, we start to see some FEED being done in North America, shifting to Asia Pacific for execution. So let's see if this pattern pursue for the next year, but it's quite interesting to see how engineering companies are also dealing with the market. In terms of project outlook, we have seen what was 2023. You see, it was quite a big year, record year. Of course, on the 12 years, we have been following up on the market, mostly fueled in terms of growth by energy transition, but not only. If we took separately, oil and gas was growing as well, petrochem as well. And now the question is, okay, is it going to pursue? Is it going to stop or not? And here for 2024, we are going to share with you three figures that maybe they are the one you need to take away from this meeting. Is that in the pipe for EPC to be targeted to be done in 2024? Sorry, it's about 857 projects representing 1.3 trillion capex US dollar. And here it's just no limit. It's more than the double of what has been already awarded in 2023. So clearly it's from another world. And here, of course, the first thing and any judgment, any sane brain would say, okay, it's impossible. It won't fit. And clearly that will be the case. Not all of those projects will be awarded and executed in 2024. It's just impossible. No engineering capacity is available to execute that. It just reflects the ambition of operator to push their project on the market. And every project today is quite in a hurry, to be honest, in terms of EPC award. So it's quite massive. Now the question is, okay, where to put the limit of those 800 projects and those 1.3 trillion US dollar, because it's quite a lot, but let's see how it goes. But to have in mind that 25%, so a quarter of this volume of project and capex has already been awarded. Okay, and we are the 9th of January. What does it mean? It means also that we start to see an effect in 2023 where a lot of engineering companies, for example, were just too busy for 2023, were starting to get awarded project, but for execution in 2024. And clearly, that's why we start 2024 with a volume of project which is more or less 300 billion already awarded. So the entire year 2019 is already awarded for 2024. That's what it means. So that's one of the key takeaway, that 2023 was a record, and most likely 2024 is going to be one as well. And the limit would be how much the supply chain can absorb those projects. Okay, because the interest from operators to push those projects is there. In terms of region, on the right, you see it does not change so much. Of course, some keys moving right and left, but North America remained the biggest player, Asia Pacific following close by, and then Middle East remaining a close player. But have in mind that 2023 was a record and 2024 is going to be even higher. In terms of capex, if we break down by oil and gas, petrochem, energy transition, it's good everywhere. You see, for example, oil and gas 2024, boom, you see kind of a step forward. Same story for petrochem, same story for energy transition. Here, hard to see and to predict where everything will be awarded. Clearly, I would say the three categories will increase. Now, if you see also the figures fading away and going to zero by 2030, doesn't mean the market is collapsing. It just reflects on our database how much we have vision of project on those years. And of course, the project for 2030 are not announced yet. But it reflects also the year 2025, which are quite full already, 2026 quite full already, which is a situation we never had before. And here it's quite uncanny, and it also reflects the pressure there is on the market to deliver project for 2024, but also for the following years. And here already in the pipe, you can assume that we have enough projects to, I would say, keep busy all the companies for the next maybe 2-3 years. So let's see, because it means that also the market will turn tricky with project being cancelled because suppliers are not able to adapt it, or some key suppliers are not able to absorb it, etc., etc. So it will be also full of trap to select the right project, be the one to fly and to go in execution. In terms of footprint, I would say it's good everywhere, except I would say regions such as Russia or Iran, which are still, I would say, suffering from a political ban, for example. But one of the key takeaways is to see, for example, for energy transition, where the hometown is really Europe. It's really the headquarter of energy transition, with US being the second center as of today of energy transition. But we start to see appearing hubs in Middle East, especially, and also in Southeast Asia, trying to take the leadership of those applications as well. If we combine everything, just to give you the four colors, you see here, for example, the step up, which has been done already in 2022, which has been pursued in 2023. We are now heading to 2024 with a forecast which is just massive, just too much. Now the question is how much of this will materialize. You see that in the pipe there is enough to skyrocket the market, and you see that the growth is, of course, I would say, mostly realized by energy transition. But if you compare oil and gas or petrochem, they're also bigger than the previous year. So it's really a combined, I would say, effort of those three categories to grow on the market. It's not something which is fading away on the next 4 or 5 years as well. So now the question is to say, okay, you understand that the industry is in front of a wall of project, a wave, maybe a tsunami even of project, and how can we adapt that? And if you're familiar with our keynote speech or our webinars, you have heard talk about this new business model, where the FEED contract is converted to EPC contract, meaning there is no bidding stage of EPC. The same company is realizing the FEED and transforming this FEED contract into EPC. And it was something which was introduced by the independent companies many years ago, which are starting to take some shares of the market. And in 2023, for the first time, it has representing more than half of the market, meaning that in 2023, 55% of the contract of EPC were not tendered. It was a result of conversion from FEED contract to EPC contract. And here it's quite interesting because if you look in terms of business model, by converting the FEED contract to EPC contract, you reduce by quite a long time frame the project, because you don't need to organize an EPC bid. And also when the EPC is awarded, you don't need to redo the work which has been done at the FEED. This new business model is pushed, and almost mandatory now for most of the Western contractors, because for them it's a way to execute more projects while saving resources and minimizing their effort to execute project. And in the meantime, today, with the level of inflation and the pressure there is on the market to produce oil and gas, but not only oil and gas, but any type of energy, you can understand the benefit of having a project which is executed and in completion 10 or 12 months earlier. So it's a benefit of investment in terms of loaning rate. It's a benefit also in terms of procurement because of the inflation, and it's a benefit in terms of cash flow because you are making money way earlier than what you could have done with a traditional business model. So when you combine everything together, that's why today the new business model is in favor on the market. And of course, whenever you are in the supply chain, it's going to impact you, because the engineering companies, but also your operator, won't have the same expectation if you're in the traditional business model or in a new business model. So it's quite important as soon as you target a project, you understand that which situation you are in, so you know how to play and which argument you need to bring in your narrative to win the order.
Okay, thank you. We'll have a closer look at energy transition because we saw that it's actually happening and there is more project on energy transition in the pipe. Now the question is who's, let's say, playing on it, and especially how the major, let's say, or the major oil and gas actors are actually tackling this issue.
Yeah, you're right, Jack. Because most of the time, and if you hear, for example, the journalist at the COP 28 just last month, we're saying, okay, the oil and gas producer, they are terrible companies, they are the one destroying the planet, blah, blah, blah. It's not wrong, to be honest, when you look at the emission, but it's not completely right. Meaning that the main oil and gas companies, as you take them, and we took this extract from the Financial Times, and if you lead them, they are the only company in the world which have, I would say, pledged to become carbon neutral by 2050, and it's a lot of effort from them, let's be honest, including their scope 3. So if you're familiar with the calculation of carbon footprint, they were all more or less happy to, I would say, become carbon neutral on scope 1 and scope 2 emission, but to include scope 3, it was quite a challenge response because it means that they will include the emission from the oil they sell to your car, for example. So the emission you will have from your car will appear into their balance sheet of carbon footprint, and they will try to compensate also the carbon footprint of your cars, for example. So it's quite a challenging situation they are in. But here, if we take all the main players, Eni, Total, Repsol, BP, Shell, Chevron, Exxon have all pledged to become carbon neutral by 2050, which is a lot. And to be honest, all those companies are more or less achieving their target every year to become carbon neutral by 2050, to become net zero, what they call net zero. So here, again, the definition can be quite discussed. But they are all on the targets. If we take the example of Total Energy, they announced, for example, last year that they had reduced CO2 carbon footprint from 2019 by 11 to 12%. So it's a massive impact, of course, on the market. And also, if you look at energy transition from an investment point of view, those companies are the biggest player. There were a study 2 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago saying that Total Energy was the biggest investor in solar energy by far, representing a bigger size of investment than the second and the third biggest investor combined. So you can imagine the size of those investments and the pace of those companies to decarbonate their activities and also to prepare the energy transition. So it's quite interesting to see that energy transition is tackled by a lot of new companies, but I would say the old folks and the old major that we know from the oil and gas are also active in this market, Equinor also being one of the leaders. In energy transition, we could also talk a lot about it, but we see it evolving in terms of technology, in terms of project organization, more and more to modular design. And what we see energy transition being, I would say, solution and brick of technology to decarbonate project. So here, for example, we put at the center a factory. It can be a refinery to remain in our industry, but it can be a cement plant or whatever in the middle. And we see decarbonation initiative happening around those high emission, saying, okay, we're going to activate every brick, so renewable energy first, to electrify all the applications that we can do. So, for example, the replacement of gas turbine as we know it in oil and gas, but also using renewable to power electrolyzer to produce green hydrogen for the process itself, or to combine this green hydrogen with CO2, which is captured from the factory, to recycle the CO2 and produce e-fuel, SAF, whatever type of fuel that might be needed. One of the key examples that we wanted to share is an example of Technip Energy, which is now producing, you see, those trucks that they can drop, I would say, on your parking lot, which are all a modular solution for carbon capture that you just need to say, I would say, plug and play to capture your CO2 in your plant. And of course, if you think about carbon capture, it's a little bit like a chemical business, okay? It's a license that you sell depending on the volume that you want to produce or you want to capture in this case. And then you line up the module depending on how much volume you need. But capturing CO2, I would say, in Sweden is the same as doing it in Namibia, is the same as doing it in US. So the technology can be replicated and copy-paste everywhere on the planet. The last piece we wanted to share about energy transition, because it starts to become quite vast world to the size comparable to petrochem and to oil and gas. And sometimes we hear, especially from not from our client, but from prospects or actors and manufacturers of equipment for process industry, to say, okay, we want to enter energy transition, we want to grab every type of project, blah, blah, blah. But to be honest, it starts to be quite vast world. And here, a little bit like in the oil and gas world, you need to be specific. You need to analyze the market of energy transition per company, per countries, of course, you can go everywhere, but mostly per application, to make sure that you rank your priorities, to make sure that you only target application where you have the best advantage and the best, I would say, added value with your equipment or your service. I would say 2 years back, energy transition was still pilot phase, small project, few, I would say, opportunities around the planet. Today, we start to see projects popping up all around the planet with a maturity, technological maturity, which is starting to be quite expert. And of course, you cannot go everywhere. So the idea is also to use tools such as Project Smart Explorer to make sure that when you want to enter energy transition, you do it by the right, I would say, application, the right country, and also the right companies, because there is a lot of room to do very well on this market, but you need to have a kind of a robust approach of this market. Going to a conclusion, and I see I've been talking already a lot of time, but here are the first, I would say, takeaway to drive your business and to keep in mind for the vision of your business for the 12 coming months, is that 2023 has been a record year for oil and gas. It has been a record year for petrochem and for energy transition as well, in all aspects. Of course, between the time the EPC contract is being awarded and you getting the order, it might be a delay, but just have in mind that it is going to be quite a tsunami of projects, and this pace is not going to fade away. 2024 is going to be a strong year as well, and the coming years are going to be quite fast. Sky is not the limit. To be honest, the supply chain will be the bottleneck clearly of what is being awarded in project, and mostly after being awarded, what will go in execution without, I would say, big problems, without delays, without postponements, because we start to see that also more and more. Also to have in mind that in 2023, the vision of energy and has quite changed following all the problematic political game. Before, I would say there were a strong focus to say, okay, energy has to be cheap and clean. Now it has also to be available and it has to be sovereign. And for Europe, it has been a big lesson, I think, this Ukraine and Russian situation, especially. Now, of course, in terms of energy transition, everybody is starting to understand that oil and gas is going to remain for decades, whatever happens. Because even if renewable is going really fast, you cannot replace all the oil and gas application by renewable. And even if that was the case, it will take decades to do. So that's why oil and gas is going to remain part of our energy mix for quite a long time. So now the challenge is to say, okay, are we going to develop design which are low carbon to reduce emission, trying not to destroy the planet? And that's why, in this sense, energy transition is restarting its maturing phase, because people are starting to be more and more pragmatic in terms of design, in terms of solution, where I would say 1 year, or let's say more 2 years or 3 years ago, we saw a new application without, I would say, really sense happening and popping up all over the planet, because it was a little bit a gold rush. Now, I would say the gold rush has faded away, and people are starting more to account and to also need to prove their technology. We are starting to finish, I would say, the pilot and demonstrator phase, to go more into the industrial phase now of the energy transition. And also, and maybe it was the biggest takeaway of 2023, is that there is a start to have a political consensus to go for decarbonation. Okay, people are starting to understand that oil and gas is going to remain, so we have to deal with it, and decarbonation is maybe the best way to do it. And decarbonation cannot go all alone. It has also to boost the renewables, and people are starting to understand a little bit this mix of energy, which is going to build up our future. And that's why it's also opening up the opportunity to public financement for decarbonation, and not only for renewable, which is also one of the big takeaways that will have an impact for 2024.